I called my son, and the line was dead. Not busy, not ringing endlessly, just gone. That flat, lifeless message echoed in my ear like a door slamming shut. For a moment, I held the phone there, waiting. Hopping maybe I pressed the wrong number. Hopping maybe my fingers had gotten clumsy with age. So I tried again. Same result. I pulled the phone away slowly and stared at it like it had betrayed me. Quentin set that phone up himself, said it was so we could always stay connected. Funny how promises like that don't last long these days. Have you ever felt that? That small shift, when something familiar suddenly feels off. That's where it starts. If your family hid something like this, would you notice in time? Because most people don't. And by the time they do, it's already too late. Subscribe now, or miss the warning signs. And if you're sitting there thinking you wouldn't need this, tell me why in the comments. I scrolled through my contacts and tapped Jillian's name. She picked up on the second ring. "Hello," she said, quick and distracted, like I'd caught her in the middle of something more important. "Jillian, it's B," I said. "I've been trying to reach Quentin. His phone isn't going through. Is everything all right?" There was a pause. Not a worried pause, not the kind you make when something's wrong. This one felt careless. "Oh," she said, like she had just remembered something minor. "I thought he told you." My grip tightened around the phone. "Told me what?" Another pause, a sigh this time, sharp, impatient. "We moved," she said. "We're in Chicago now." The words didn't land all at once. They came in pieces, like my mind refused to accept them together. "Moved," I repeated, "to Chicago." "Yeah," she said. "About 2 months ago, Quentin got a big opportunity. It all happened fast." 2 months. I stood there in silence, trying to place that timeline somewhere that made sense. It didn't. "You moved 2 months ago," I said slowly, "and no one thought to tell me." "We meant to," she replied, already sounding tired of the conversation. "It was hectic. Packing, paperwork, flights, you know how these things go." "No, I don't. You forget your keys. You forget milk. You don't forget your mother. Not unless she was never a priority to begin with." "I see," I said quietly. "Anyway," she added quickly, "I'm heading into something right now. Quentin will call you later, okay?" Click. Just like that. No apology. No explanation. Just a clean, careless exit. I lowered the phone slowly. Something wasn't right. I didn't argue. I didn't call back. Instead, I did what I had done every Sunday for the past 5 years. I got in my car. There was a peach cobbler sitting on the passenger seat, still warm. I had woken up early to make it. Quentin always liked extra cinnamon. Some habits don't break easily. The drive to their house took 20 minutes. Same route, same turns, same quiet streets. But that day, something felt off before I even arrived. I couldn't explain it yet. Just a feeling sitting heavy in my chest. When I turned into their street, I slowed down without thinking. And when I pulled into the driveway, I didn't turn off the engine. The lawn was wrong. Quentin used to care about that lawn more than anything. Trimmed edges, clean lines, not a weed in sight. Now, it looked forgotten. Overgrown, uneven, like no one had touched it in weeks. My eyes moved slowly across the yard and landed on the sign. "For sale." 3 words. But that's not what made my heart drop. It was the smaller line underneath. Under contract. I sat there, hands still on the steering wheel, staring at it. Maybe I had the wrong house. It happens, streets look similar. But then I saw the mailbox. Same chipped paint I had complained about for years. Same dent on the side. This was their house. No. This was my house too. I stepped out of the car slowly, my knees stiff, my thoughts even slower. The front door stood exactly the same. But everything else felt empty. I knocked. Once. Twice. Nothing. I moved to the side window and leaned in just enough to see inside. The living room was gone. Not changed. Gone. No couch, no decorations, no sign of life. Just bare floors and dust catching the light. Packing scraps scattered across the ground like leftovers of a life that had been packed up in a hurry. That's when the truth settled in. They didn't just move. They disappeared. And they didn't want me to know. I stood there for a long time, staring into that hollow space, feeling something inside me go very quiet. Not sadness. Not yet. Something colder. Something steadier. The kind of silence that comes right before everything changes. I walked back to my car, opened the door, and sat down without starting the engine. The cobbler sat beside me, untouched. Still warm. Still meant for people who weren't there anymore. I looked at it for a moment, then looked back at the house. 2 months. They had been gone for 2 months. No calls. No message. No warning. Just gone. And somehow, I was supposed to believe they forgot. I let out a slow breath and leaned back in my seat. They thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I wouldn't question it. They thought I would just accept whatever story they gave me. That's when the feeling changed. Not confusion. Not hurt. Clarity. Sharp, quiet, certain. Because people don't forget things like that. They hide them. And if they're hiding something this big, it means the truth is worse. They said they forgot to tell me, but I knew something was wrong. My name is Beatrice Miller. Most people call me B. Not because we're close, but because it's easier. I've lived in the same corner of Ohio for 68 years, long enough to watch neighbors come and go, long enough to know that people will show you exactly who they are if you stop talking long enough to notice. That's something age teaches you. Silence is more honest than words. I wasn't always this quiet, though. There was a time my house was loud, full, busy. Back when my husband was still alive. Back when Quentin was just a boy running through the hallway with muddy shoes and no sense of consequence. Back when I didn't have to think so hard about trust. When my husband passed, the house didn't just get quieter. It got heavier. Every decision became mine. Every bill, every repair, every small crack in the walls, mine to handle. And Quentin, he became my focus. Not out of obligation. Out of choice. I made sure he never felt the weight I was carrying. I worked, I saved, I sacrificed things he never even noticed. That's what mothers do. We build the road and let our children believe they found it themselves. Quentin was a good boy. At least, that's what I believed. Polite, ambitious, always chasing something bigger than where he came from. He didn't want a simple life. He wanted more. A better house, a better job, a better circle of people. I never held that against him. Every parent wants their child to rise higher. But sometimes, in the process of reaching higher, people forget what they're standing on. After college, he got into marketing, always talking about opportunities and growth and next-level moves. I didn't always understand what he did. But I listened. Because that's what he needed. Someone who believed him, even when the words sounded bigger than the reality. And for a long time, that was enough. Then Jillian came into the picture. I remember the first time I met her. She walked into my home like she was visiting a place she had already judged. Everything about her was precise. The way she dressed, the way she spoke, the way her eyes moved across the room, taking inventory of things she didn't say out loud. She smiled, of course, but it never quite reached her eyes. You learn to notice those things when you've lived long enough. Still, Quentin loved her. And when your child loves someone, you try. You adjust, you make space. Even when something in you hesitates. Jillian liked things a certain way. Clean lines, modern furniture, Quiet conversations that didn't last too long. My home wasn't that. But I didn't take it personally. At least, not in the beginning. For 5 years, we had a routine. Every Sunday morning, I would wake up early and start cooking. Sometimes it was pot roast. Sometimes peach cobbler. Always something Quentin used to love growing up. I'd pack it carefully, place it on the passenger seat, and make the 20-minute drive to their house. Their neighborhood was different from mine. Neater, newer, quieter in a way that didn't feel lived in. Their house sat right in the middle of it all. Large windows, clean yard, everything in its place. Jillian would open the door. "Hi, B," she'd say, stepping aside just enough to let me in. Never rude. Just measured. We'd sit on the porch most days. Quentin would talk about work. Big ideas, bigger plans. Always something just around the corner that was going to change everything. And Jillian. She'd sit beside him, checking her watch more often than she checked in with me. At first, I ignored it. People have different ways of being. But over time, patterns become hard to miss. It wasn't one moment. It was many. Small things. The kind people overlook because they don't want to make something out of nothing. Jillian correcting Quentin when he spoke. Jillian deciding when the visit was over. Jillian subtly steering conversations away from anything that felt personal. And Quentin. He followed her lead more often than not. Not completely, but enough. Enough for me to notice. Still, he laughed with me. Still called me Mom in that same familiar tone. Still ate the food I brought. And sometimes, that's all it takes to convince yourself everything is fine. 5 years is a long time. Long enough to build trust without realizing it. Long enough to believe that no matter how much life changes, certain things stay the same. Like family. Like loyalty. Like the understanding that no matter where your child goes, they don't leave you behind. I never asked for much. Just honesty. Just respect. Just the simple courtesy of being remembered. And Quentin knew that. Or at least, I thought he did. There are things a mother does that never get spoken about. Money given quietly. Problems handled before they become visible. Support offered without conditions. Quentin didn't see most of it. He didn't need to. That was the point. But those choices, they add up. Not in a way that demands repayment, but in a way that builds expectation. Not expectation of money. Expectation of care. Of consideration. Of basic decency. And when that expectation gets broken, it doesn't feel like disappointment. It feels like something deeper. Something harder to name. Let me ask you something. Have you ever trusted someone just because they were family? No proof. No reason. Just the belief that blood meant something. Most people do. And most people don't realize the risk in that until it's too late. Because trust, when given without question, can become something else entirely. Something people learn to take advantage of. Sitting in my car that day, staring at that empty house. All those years came back to me. Every visit. Every conversation. Every small moment I chose to ignore. Not because I didn't see it, but because I didn't want to. That's the part people don't talk about. Sometimes, we see the truth early. We just choose comfort instead. And comfort has a cost. Looking back now, the signs were always there. I stood there on that porch longer than I should have. Long enough for the quiet to start pressing in. Long enough for the truth to settle into something I couldn't ignore. The house wasn't just empty. It had been cleared out. Everything that made it theirs, gone. No last-minute rush, no signs of panic. This was planned. Carefully. Deliberately. I turned my head slowly, scanning the street as if someone might step out and explain it all. But nothing moved. No neighbors watching, no passing cars slowing down. Just stillness. The kind that makes you realize whatever happened here didn't include you. I reached into my purse again and pulled out my phone. One more time. Quentin. I pressed call. And once again. Nothing. That same lifeless message. Disconnected. Like he had erased the number entirely. My thumb hovered over the screen for a moment before I tapped Jillian's name again. She had picked up earlier. She would pick up again. This time, it rang longer. 3 times. 4. Then. Hello, she said. Same tone. Same impatience. Like I was interrupting something far more important. Jillian, I said, keeping my voice steady, I'm at the house. A pause. Short. Controlled. Oh, she replied, you drove over there. I looked at the empty windows in front of me. Yes, I said, I did. Another pause. Then a sigh. Not concern. Not guilt. Just inconvenience. Well, I told you, we moved. You said Chicago, I replied, but you didn't say anything about this. What do you mean? She asked, though her tone made it clear she already knew. The house, I said, it's empty, there's a sign in the yard, under contract. Silence. Not confusion. Not surprise. Just silence. Then she spoke again. Flat. We sold it. You sold it, I repeated. Yes. When? Recently. How recently? Another pause. About 2 months ago. The same number again. 2 months. Everything kept pointing back to that same stretch of time. A timeline I had no part in. No one told me, I said. We meant to, she replied quickly. Things were hectic, there was a lot going on. That word again. Hectic. As if that explained everything. As if that made it reasonable. I turned slightly, looking back at the driveway where I had parked every Sunday for years. You moved, I said slowly. Sold the house, changed numbers. Yes. And forgot to tell me. A small pause. Then. Yes. Just like that. No hesitation. No attempt to soften it. Just a simple answer to something that should never have been simple. There was noise behind her. Loud. Constant. Cars passing, distant sirens, voices overlapping. Chicago. It sounded busy. Alive. Everything my street was. I stood there, surrounded by silence, listening to a life I hadn't been invited into. Where exactly are you? I asked. In the city, she said. Downtown. Of course. Somewhere high up, somewhere polished. Somewhere far from this quiet porch. You could have called, I said. We were going to, she replied. It just slipped. Slipped. Like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. That's when something changed. Not loudly. Not all at once. But clearly. Up until that moment, there had been a part of me still searching for a reason that made sense. Something urgent. Something unavoidable. Something that explained why my own son would disappear without a word. But there it was. The truth. Simple. Careless. They didn't forget because they were busy. They forgot because it didn't matter enough to remember. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. Is Quentin there? I asked. No, she said. He's at work. At work, I repeated. Yes, it's a new role, very demanding. I'd like to speak with him. I'll let him know you called, she replied quickly. That wasn't what I asked. I'd like to speak with him today. Another pause. I'll tell him, she said again. Dismissive. Final. Like the conversation had already ended in her mind. I nodded to myself, even though she couldn't see it. "I understand," I said. "Good," she replied, "because I really have to go." Of course she did. There was always somewhere else to be. Someone else to impress. Something else that mattered more. "All right," I said. "Bye, B." Click. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly and looked back at the house one last time. Empty windows. Bare rooms. A space that used to hold conversations, meals, small moments that felt ordinary at the time. Now it was just a shell. Sold. Closed off. Already belonging to someone else. And somehow, I had been the last to know. Not by accident, but by choice. Their choice. I stepped off the porch and walked back toward my car, each step slower than the last. The air felt heavier now. Not because something had happened, but because something had been revealed. This wasn't just poor communication. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was distance. Intentional. Measured. Final. And if they could do this so easily, what else had they already decided without me? I reached my car, placed my hand on the door handle, and stopped. One thought settling firmly in my mind. You don't forget something like that unless you're hiding worse. The next few days passed quietly. Too quietly. No call from Quentin. No message. No explanation. At first, I told myself he was busy, adjusting, settling into whatever new life they had chosen. But silence has a way of stretching until it becomes something you can't ignore. On the fourth morning, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea I hadn't touched. The house was still. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. And then the phone rang. Not my mobile. The landline. I hadn't heard it ring that early in years. For a moment, I just looked at it. Then I reached over and picked it up. "Hello. Is this Beatrice Miller?" a man asked. His voice was sharp, direct, no warmth in it. "Yes," I replied. "This is Marcus Thorne calling from First National Bank. I'm contacting you regarding the mortgage on the property located at 422 Maple Drive." My grip tightened slightly on the receiver. Maple Drive. Quentin's house. No, the house I had just stood in front of days ago. "I'm listening," I said. There was a brief pause, as if he were checking something on his end. "Ma'am, the account is currently 60 days past due. We have not received any payments since the last billing cycle, and previous notices have gone unanswered." 60 days. 2 months. The same number again. Everything kept leading back to that same moment in time. "I'm sorry," I said carefully. "There must be some mistake." "I assure you, ma'am, there is no mistake," he replied. "As the primary co-signer on this loan, you are legally responsible for ensuring the payments are made." Co-signer. The word sat there for a second before it fully settled in. "I understand I co-signed," I said slowly, "but my son lives there, or lived there." "Yes, ma'am," he said. "Our records indicate the property has been vacated." Vacated. Such a simple word for something that felt much heavier. "And payments stopped at the same time?" I asked. "That is correct." I leaned back slightly in my chair, my eyes drifting toward the window. Everything was starting to align. Too neatly. "And what happens now?" I asked. Another short pause. "If the outstanding balance is not brought current by Friday, the account will be escalated to foreclosure proceedings," he said. "This will be reported against your credit history immediately." Foreclosure. I had heard the word before. Seen it happen to others. Never thought it would be attached to my name. "And how much is owed?" I asked. He read out the number. Calmly. Like it was just another account. But to me, it wasn't just a number. It was years of work, stability, security. Everything I had built, now tied to a decision I made for my son. I stayed quiet for a moment after he finished speaking. Not because I didn't understand, but because I did. Too clearly. "Let me ask you something," I said. "Yes, ma'am." "When were the last successful payments made?" He checked again. 2 months ago. Of course. And prior to that, were payments consistent? Yes, he said. There were no issues before that point. No issues. Until they left. Until they sold the house. Until they disappeared. Thank you, I said. Will you be making a payment today? He asked. Straight to the point. No, I replied calmly. Not today. Then I must inform you. I understand, I interrupted gently. You've made everything very clear. There was a pause. Very well, ma'am, he said. We will await your response. The line clicked. I placed the receiver back in its cradle and sat there without moving. The tea in front of me had gone cold. I didn't reach for it. Didn't need to. There was something colder settling in already. Piece by piece, everything was lining up. They moved. They sold the house. They changed numbers. They stopped paying. And they didn't tell me. Not once. Not before. Not after. That wasn't confusion. That wasn't forgetfulness. That was a decision. I leaned back in my chair and let out a slow breath. One question kept repeating in my mind. Clear, simple, impossible to ignore. Why leave me with the debt when they had money? Because they had money. I had seen it in the way they lived. The way they spent. The way Jillian carried herself like she had already arrived somewhere better. This wasn't about being unable to pay. This was about choosing not to. Choosing to walk away. And leaving me to deal with what remained. That's when the last piece fell into place. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just firmly. They didn't just move to start a new life. They cleared the path before they left. Sold the house. Took what they could. And left the responsibility behind. With me. Because I was the safest place to leave it. Because I was the one person who wouldn't fight back. Or so they believed. I stood up slowly and walked over to the fridge. There was a photo of Quentin pinned to it. Graduation day. Young, smiling, looking like the kind of person who wouldn't do something like this. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I looked away. Because the person in that photo wasn't the one making decisions now. The one making decisions now had calculated everything. Distance. Silence. Responsibility. And where to place it. That's when I realized they didn't just leave, they ran. After that call from the bank, I didn't panic. I didn't rush. I sat down and let my mind go back. Because answers don't always come from what's happening now. Sometimes they come from what already happened and was ignored. And there it was. Clear as day. The moment everything began. It was 5 years ago. Quentin showed up at my door without calling first. That alone told me something was wrong. He didn't usually visit unannounced. He liked things scheduled, controlled. But that day, he looked different. Not broken. Not desperate. Just uneasy. Mom, he said, stepping inside without waiting to be invited. I need to talk to you about something important. I remember setting down the dish towel in my hand and turning toward him. What is it? I asked. He hesitated. Just long enough to make it feel real. Not rehearsed. We found a house, he said. He started talking quickly after that. About the neighborhood. About the space. About how it was perfect for the future. Not just any house. The right house. The kind that meant something. I listened. Because I always did. And what's the problem? I asked. He exhaled and rubbed the back of his neck. My credit isn't where it should be, he admitted. And Jillian, well, she's got expenses. Expenses. That was one way to put it. The bank says we need a stronger application, he continued. Just to secure the loan, nothing long-term, just a formality. A formality. That word again. Always something small, until it is. Mom, he said, stepping closer, lowering his voice slightly. I need you to co-sign. There it was. Simple. Direct. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't want to help, but because I understood what that meant. Co-signing isn't just a favor. It's a commitment. You'll be responsible if we fall behind, he added quickly. But we won't, I promise you that. Promises come easily when nothing has gone wrong yet. I'll handle every payment, he continued. You won't have to think about it. I just need your name on the paperwork so they approve us. I looked at him. Really looked at him. He wasn't a boy anymore. But in that moment, he sounded like one. You know I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important, he said. That line. That tone. Carefully placed. You've always had my back, he added. This is just one more step, one more push. I felt it. That pull. Not pressure. Something quieter. The kind that comes from years of being needed. From years of being the one who fixes things. I trust you, I said. And I meant it. At the time. The bank office was clean, quiet, controlled. We sat across from a man who spoke in steady, practiced sentences. He explained the terms. The responsibility. The risks. All the things people hear, but don't fully absorb. Because they're focused on something else. In my case, I was focused on Quentin. He nodded along with everything. Confident. Assured. Like nothing could go wrong. Do you understand your obligations as a co-signer? The man asked me. Yes, I said. And I did. At least, I thought I did. He slid the papers toward me. One after another. Lines to sign. Spaces to fill. Each signature tying me more tightly to something that didn't belong to me. I didn't rush. But I didn't hesitate either. Because in my mind, I wasn't signing for a house. I was supporting my son. There was a moment. Brief. Almost easy to miss. Where I paused. The pen hovering just above the paper. A small voice in the back of my mind asking a simple question. What if something goes wrong? I looked up. Quentin was watching me. Waiting. Trusting. Or at least appearing to. And that was enough to quiet that voice. I signed. After that day, everything moved quickly. The house was secured. Keys exchanged. Furniture delivered. Photos posted. It looked like success. Like progress. Like everything had worked out exactly as planned. And for a while it did. Payments were made. No calls from the bank. No problems. No warning signs that felt big enough to act on. Just small things. Subtle shifts. The kind you notice, but don't question. Because questioning them would mean questioning something bigger. Trust creates comfort. And comfort creates blind spots. I didn't check statements. I didn't ask about payments. I didn't look too closely at anything that seemed slightly off. Because I believed him. Because I believed in what I had signed for. And more than anything, because I believed in him. That was the mistake. Not the signature itself, but the assumption that it would always be honored. Let me ask you something. Would you sign this for your child? Would you sit in that chair, hear those terms, and still put your name on that line? Most people would say yes, without hesitation, because that's what family means to them. Support. Trust. Standing behind someone when they need you. But here's the part most people don't think about. What happens when that trust isn't returned? Sitting in my kitchen now, years later. With the bank calling. With the house gone. With the silence where my son's voice used to be. That moment in the bank felt different. He didn't just need help. He needed protection. And I gave it to him. Freely. Without conditions. Without limits. And in doing so, I gave him something else. An opening. A way out that didn't cost him anything. Because it would cost me instead. That piece of paper wasn't just a formality. It was leverage. Control. Responsibility. And now, consequences. Everything that was happening now traced back to that moment. That decision. That choice I made, believing I was doing the right thing. That signature was supposed to protect him, not destroy me. After that memory settled in, I didn't rush to act. That's something people get wrong. They think reacting quickly means you're in control. It doesn't. It just means you're emotional. And emotion clouds judgment. So I stayed seated at my kitchen table. Hands folded. Eyes steady. Letting everything line up in my mind. The move. The silence. The missed payments. The timeline. It wasn't random. It was structured. And if something is structured, it can be understood. I reached for the phone again. Not Quentin. Not Jillian. Someone else. Someone who had seen me through years of paperwork, accounts, and numbers that didn't lie. Brenda. She worked at the local branch of the bank. We had known each other for a long time. Long enough for conversations to go beyond formalities. She picked up after 2 rings. "B," she said, surprised. "Everything all right?" "No," I replied calmly, "but I need information." There was a pause. The kind that tells you someone is already paying attention. "What do you need?" she asked. "I got a call this morning," I said, "about the mortgage on Maple Drive." Another pause. This one heavier. "B," she started, then stopped herself. "I was wondering when you'd call." That told me everything. "You know something," I said. "I know enough," she replied carefully. "What exactly did they tell you?" "That payment stopped 2 months ago," I said, "and that I'm responsible." "That part is correct," she said. I nodded to myself. "I need more than correct," I replied. "I need details." I could hear her typing on the other end. Keys moving quickly. Records opening. "Okay," she said after a moment. "There's something you should know." "I'm listening." "A request came in about 3 months ago," she said, "to change the mailing address on the account." My grip tightened slightly. "Who made the request?" I asked. "It was submitted under Quentin's name," she said. "He stated you were unable to manage your affairs." I didn't speak. Not immediately. Because some words take a moment to fully register. "Unable," I repeated. "He used the term incapacitated," she said quietly. "Incapacitated." I sat back slowly in my chair. Not angry. Not shocked. Just clear. That wasn't a mistake. That wasn't confusion. That was intentional. He didn't just leave me out of the decision. He removed me from it entirely. On paper. To the bank. To anyone who might ask questions. "Was the request approved?" I asked. "No," she said. "It raised concerns. We flagged it internally." Good. At least someone had been paying attention. "Brenda," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I need to know where the payments were coming from before they stopped." More typing. More silence. Then, "There was a joint savings account," she said. "Funds were being drawn from there consistently." "Was there money left in it?" I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. "Not anymore," she said. "How much was taken?" I heard her exhale softly. $50,000, she replied. "Withdrawn in a single transaction, the day before the move." 50,000. Gone. Just like that. I closed my eyes for a brief moment. Not to escape it, but to see it more clearly. They didn't just stop paying. They cleared the account, moved the money, changed their location, cut off contact, and tried to redirect communication away from me. Every step connected. Every move calculated. "Thank you, Brenda," I said. "B," she replied, softer now. "You need to be careful. This doesn't look good." "I know," I said. And I did. Better than she realized. I hung up the phone and sat there for a moment. Then I stood up and walked over to my old filing cabinet. Quentin used to joke about it. Called it outdated. Said everything should be digital. Maybe he was right. But paper has one advantage. It doesn't disappear unless someone removes it. I opened the drawer and pulled out the mortgage documents. Every page. Every signature. Every detail I had agreed to years ago. I laid them out on the table carefully, reading them again slowly. Not as a mother, but as someone looking for truth. That's when it became undeniable. They didn't plan to manage the loan. They planned to escape it. Sell the property. Take whatever remained after the sale. And leave the rest behind. Attached to my name. Because legally, it could be. And they knew that. That's the part that mattered most. They understood the system. And they used it. Most people would panic at this point. Call repeatedly. Demand answers. Break down under the weight of it. But panic doesn't solve anything. It only weakens your position. So I didn't panic. I adjusted. Because once you understand what someone has done, you can decide what to do next. Let me tell you something. Most people freeze when things stop making sense. They hesitate. They wait. They hope the situation corrects itself. But situations like this don't correct themselves. They get worse. And by the time most people act, it's already too late. Most people freeze here and lose everything. Subscribe so you're never that unprepared. And if you still think you wouldn't need this, say why below. I gathered the papers and placed them back into the folder neatly. Everything I needed was already in front of me. The timeline. The money. The intent. No more guessing. No more giving them the benefit of the doubt. Because doubt was no longer justified. They didn't just lie, they planned this. After going through the documents, I didn't feel confused anymore. I felt focused. Because once the numbers made sense, the next question became simple. Where did it all go? Not just the money. The life. The choices. The truth. I walked over to my desk and opened my laptop. It took me a moment to remember the password. Quentin had set it up for me years ago, saying it would keep me connected. Funny how things come full circle. I clicked into the browser and typed Jillian's name. She always liked attention. People like that rarely hide. Her profile came up instantly. Public. Of course. I clicked on it. And there it was. A photo posted just days ago. Jillian standing in front of a massive window, the city stretching out behind her. Tall buildings. Bright lights. Everything polished and expensive. She was smiling. Wearing a dress that didn't come cheap. The kind of outfit you don't buy unless you want to be noticed. The caption read, "New city, new life." I stared at it for a long moment. New life. That part was true. But it wasn't built from nothing. I scrolled down. Another photo. This time inside what looked like a high-rise apartment. Clean lines, wide space, floor-to-ceiling windows. Everything looked untouched. Like a place designed to impress, not to live in. And there he was. Quentin. Standing beside her. holding a glass of something expensive, smiling like nothing had ever gone wrong. Like there was no house left behind. No responsibility waiting to catch up. No mother sitting in silence, trying to understand how it all happened. Just ease. Comfort. Enjoyment. I leaned closer to the screen. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to see everything clearly. The furniture. Modern, costly. The lighting. Soft, controlled. The view alone probably cost more than my entire home. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't a step down. This was an upgrade. And upgrades don't happen when people are struggling. They happen when people choose to spend. I kept scrolling. That's when I saw it. A post from just 2 days ago. A car. Silver. Shining under the city lights. The kind of vehicle that turns heads without trying. Jillian stood beside it, one hand resting lightly on the door. Smiling again. Always smiling. The caption read, "Finally got the upgrade I deserve." Deserve. That word settled in slowly. Because nothing about this situation had anything to do with deserving. It had everything to do with choosing. And they had chosen this. I sat back in my chair, letting everything sink in. The timeline. The money. The silence. The move. The missed payments. And now this. The apartment. The clothes. The car. All appearing at the exact same time, everything else disappeared. That wasn't coincidence. That was a trade. They didn't leave with nothing. They left with everything they wanted. And left everything they didn't want. Behind. With me. I closed the laptop halfway and looked around my kitchen. Same table. Same chairs. Same quiet space I had lived in for years. Nothing had changed here. No sudden upgrades. No dramatic shifts. Just consistency. Stability. The kind of life that gets built slowly. Piece by piece. While across the screen, they were living fast. Spending freely. Enjoying a life that had no visible connection to responsibility. And somehow, that contrast made everything clearer. This wasn't about survival. This wasn't about being overwhelmed or unable to keep up. This was a decision. A deliberate one. To step into something new. And leave the cost of it behind. Because they could. Because they believed no one would stop them. Because they believed I wouldn't. Let me ask you something. Be honest, would you forgive this? Would you look at those photos? See that life? Know where it came from? And still choose to understand? Most people like to think they would. Until they're the ones sitting alone, putting the pieces together. Because forgiveness sounds different when the damage is yours. I opened the laptop again and looked at the screen one last time. At the smiles. At the comfort. At the life they had stepped into without hesitation. No stress. No pressure. No sign of the responsibility they left behind. That's when it became undeniable. Clear in a way nothing else had been. They weren't struggling, they were celebrating. It was late afternoon when my phone finally rang. Not the landline this time. My mobile. I didn't need to look at the screen to know who it was. But I did anyway. Quentin. I let it ring once. Twice. 3 times. Not out of hesitation. Out of control. Then I answered. "Hello." "Mom," he said quickly. "Hey, I've been meaning to call you." His voice sounded smooth. Too smooth. Like someone stepping carefully across thin ice. "I've been waiting," I replied. A small pause. "I know," he said. "Things have just been a lot lately." That word again. A lot. Always vague. Always convenient. "I heard from Jillian," I continued. About the move. Yeah, he said. I was going to tell you myself, but everything happened so fast. Vast. Another easy explanation. You left 2 months ago, I said. Yes, he replied. But you know how things are when you're trying to set up in a new city. I didn't respond right away. Letting the silence stretch just enough. Letting him fill it. I didn't want to stress you out, he added. You've got enough going on. There it was. The shift. Not just an excuse. A repositioning. Turning the situation into something he did for me. I see, I said softly. That's when I made a decision. Not emotional. Strategic. I let my voice change slightly. Slower. Less certain. Well, I suppose I've been a bit confused lately, I said. Things don't always make sense the way they used to. He paused. And in that pause, I heard it. Relief. Not concern. Relief. That's okay, Mom, he said quickly. It's a lot to keep track of. That's why I didn't want to overwhelm you. There it was again. Positioning. He wasn't just explaining. He was adjusting the narrative. Making it easier for himself. I got a call from the bank, I said gently. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, oh, he said. Yeah, I was going to talk to you about that. Of course he was. I didn't quite understand everything they said, I continued. Something about payments. Right, he replied quickly. There's just been a small delay, nothing serious. Small. Nothing serious. I kept my tone light. Oh, all right, I said. I was worried for a moment. No, he said. Everything under control. That word again. Control. But his voice had shifted slightly. Tighter now. Careful. The house is sold, isn't it? I asked. Yes, he said. We finalized that before we left. And the money from that, I let the question hang. We reinvested it, he said quickly. Reinvested. Interesting choice of word. Into what? I asked. A few things, he replied. Opportunities here. You wouldn't really be familiar with the details. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. Of course I wouldn't. That was the point. Keep it vague. Keep it distant. Keep it out of reach. There was a brief silence. Then his tone shifted again. Softer now. Careful. Mom, he said, there is something I wanted to ask you. There it was. The real reason. I figured, I replied quietly. He chuckled lightly. Nervous. Nothing big, he said, just temporary. Temporary. Another word people use when they don't intend to carry the weight themselves. We're just waiting on a few things to clear, he continued. Timing issues, you know how that goes. I didn't answer. Letting him continue. I was hoping you could help us out, he said, just until everything settles. How much? I asked. A short pause. Then, 10,000. I let the number sit there. 10,000. Not small. Not casual. Not something you ask unless you believe the answer will be yes. That's quite a bit, I said softly. It's only short term, he replied quickly. We'll pay you back as soon as everything clears. Of course they would. Just like before. Things are just a little tight right now, he added. Tight. I thought about the photos. The apartment. The car. The lifestyle. Tight wasn't the word I would have used. I don't know, I said, letting uncertainty settle into my voice. I've been trying to keep things simple lately. I understand, he said, but his tone suggested otherwise. But this would really help us stabilize. Stabilize. Another word. Carefully chosen. I just don't want to make any mistakes, I added quietly. You're not making a mistake, he said quickly. You're helping your family. There it was. The pressure point. Family. Always the strongest lever. As he spoke, I stopped listening to the words themselves and started listening to the pattern. Excuse. Reassurance. Minimization. Request. Pressure. It was all there. Layered carefully. Delivered smoothly. But clear. Too clear. He thought I was confused. That I wouldn't connect the details. That I would accept the story as it was given. But I wasn't confused. I was counting. Every word. Every shift. Every gap that didn't line up. I'll have to think about it, I said. A pause. Then, of course, he replied, take your time. But there was tension now. Expectation. He wasn't used to hesitation. I just need to look at a few things, I added. All right, he said, but sooner would be better. We're on a bit of a timeline. Of course they were. They always were. Okay, I said gently. Thanks, Mom, he replied. I knew I could count on you. I didn't respond to that. Because the meaning had changed. Completely. We ended the call shortly after. No warmth. No real connection. Just a transaction waiting to happen. I placed the phone down slowly and sat there in silence. Everything was clear now. Not just what they had done, but what they believed. They believed I would still say yes. That I would still step in. That I would still carry the weight, without question. And that belief was about to cost them. Because here, what Quentin didn't understand. I wasn't confused. I wasn't overwhelmed. And I certainly wasn't unaware. He thought I was confused. I was counting every lie. After that call, I didn't feel anger. Not the kind that makes people shout or act without thinking. What I felt was sharper than that. Focused. Because now I understood exactly where I stood. Not as a mother being misled, but as someone being used. And once you see that clearly, everything changes. You stop asking questions that don't matter and start looking for answers that do. The next morning, I sat down at my desk again. Same laptop. Same steady hands. But a different purpose. This time, I wasn't looking to understand them. I was looking to verify them. I started with public records. Property listings. Sale history. Anything tied to the address on Maple Drive. It didn't take long. The house had sold quickly. Faster than expected. That alone told me something. They didn't wait for the best offer. They took the fastest exit. The listing showed the sale price. Higher than what they had originally paid. Meaning there was profit. Not just a little. Enough to clear debts. Enough to stay current on the mortgage. Enough to avoid everything that was happening now. So the question wasn't whether they could pay. The question was why they chose not to. I went back to Jillian's social page. Looked closer this time. Not at the smiles. Not at the outfits. At the details. Reflections in windows. Building names in the background. Small clues people don't think about when they're showing off. Eventually, I found it. A high-rise building in downtown Chicago. Luxury apartments. Private parking. Security at the entrance. The kind of place that requires more than just a casual application. It took some time. A few calls. A few quiet conversations. Nothing rushed. Nothing obvious. But eventually, I got what I needed. The lease. Not directly, but enough information to confirm it existed. Under Quentin's name. And Jillian. A long-term agreement. Not temporary. Not a stopgap. They had settled in. Comfortably. While everything back home remained unresolved. That's when something else came up. Something I hadn't been looking for. But once I saw it, I couldn't ignore it. There was a business listing tied to Quentin's name. Recently registered. New. Active. At the same Chicago address. That didn't match the story he gave me. He said things were tight. Delayed. Uncertain. But business registrations don't happen when people are uncertain. They happen when people are moving forward. With intention. I pulled at that thread. Carefully. Patiently. Because details matter. And when people think they've covered their tracks, they often leave gaps. The business had a credit line attached to it. Recently approved. Large enough to fund the kind of lifestyle I had seen. That alone was enough to raise questions. But it wasn't the amount that caught my attention. It was the information used to secure it. I leaned closer to the screen as I read through the details again. Slowly. Carefully. Making sure I hadn't misunderstood. But I hadn't. My name was there. Not as a cosigner. Not as a reference. As part of the financial background used in the application. Without my consent. Without my knowledge. That wasn't just a poor decision. That was something else entirely. Something deliberate. Something serious. I sat back in my chair and let the realization settle in. This wasn't just about the house anymore. This wasn't just about missed payments. They had taken it further. Used my identity. My financial standing. To build something new for themselves. While leaving me exposed to the consequences of what they abandoned. That changed everything. Because once that line is crossed, it's no longer a misunderstanding. It's a choice. I didn't react right away. Didn't pick up the phone. Didn't confront anyone. Because confrontation gives people time to adjust. Time to prepare. Time to hide what you haven't found yet. And I wasn't done looking. Instead, I wrote everything down. Dates. Amounts. Connections. Every piece of information that linked one decision to another. Building a picture that couldn't be denied. Let me ask you something. What would you do? Walk away or fight back? Most people say they'd fight. But when the situation becomes real, when it involves family, when it risks everything you've built, that answer becomes harder. Because walking away feels easier. Safer. Less complicated. But easier doesn't mean right. And safe doesn't mean secure. I closed the laptop slowly and placed my hands flat on the table. Everything was in place now. The truth. The evidence. The pattern. They believed they had created distance. That being far away meant being untouchable. That leaving quietly meant leaving clean. But distance doesn't erase responsibility. And silence doesn't protect you from consequences. It only delays them. And I wasn't interested in delay. They wanted a new life. I was about to rewrite it. By the time I decided to call Quentin again, everything was already in place. The documents. The records. The inconsistencies. I wasn't calling to learn anything new. I was calling to confirm what I already knew. Because there's a difference between suspicion and certainty. And certainty changes how you move. I picked up my phone and dialed his number. This time, I didn't let it ring long. He answered quickly. Almost like he was expecting me. "Mom," he said. "Hey, I was just thinking about you." Of course he was. "I've been thinking too," I replied gently. "About what?" he asked. "About what you said the other day," I continued. "About things being a little tight." A short pause. Then, "Yeah," he said. "Just temporary, nothing to worry about." Nothing to worry about. That phrase again. "I see," I said. "I've just been trying to understand everything better." "That's good," he replied quickly. "No need to stress yourself out." There it was again. Positioning me as the one who couldn't keep up. making it easier for him to stay in control. I was also looking at a few things online, I said casually. Online, he repeated. Yes, I replied. Your new place looks very nice. Silence. Short. Tight. Yeah, he said after a moment. It's all right, just something we found. Just something. As if it wasn't worth mentioning. It looks expensive, I added softly. Another pause. Well, it's temporary, he said. We got a good deal. A good deal. On a high-rise apartment in the city. Interesting. And the car, I asked. What car? He replied quickly. The one Jillian posted, I said. The silver one. Another pause. Longer this time. Oh, that, he said. It's not ours. Not ours. It's just a rental, he added. For convenience. Convenience. Of course. I nodded slowly, even though he couldn't see it. Everything had an explanation. Quick. Simple. Unconvincing. I understand, I said. I suppose things just look different from the outside. Exactly, he replied, sounding relieved. You can't always trust what you see online. That was true. But sometimes, it tells you more than people intend. I just want to make sure you're all right, I continued. We're fine, he said. Like I said, just a few timing issues. Timing. Always timing. Never responsibility. And the business, I asked. Silence. This time not brief. Not controlled. Real. What business? He said finally. The one registered in Chicago, I replied calmly. Another pause. Then his tone shifted. Slightly sharper. Where are you getting all this from? He asked. I didn't answer that. Because the source didn't matter. The truth did. I just like to stay informed, I said. Well, you don't need to worry about that, he replied quickly. It's nothing finalized. Nothing finalized. Yet it existed. Quentin, I said softly, I'm trying to understand why things feel so unclear. They're not unclear, he replied, his voice tightening. You're just overthinking it. There it was. The shift. From calm to defensive. I don't think I am, I said. Well, I do, he snapped. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. Bigger than it needs to be. I let that sit for a moment. Then, the bank called me, I said. Silence. Complete this time. No quick answer. No smooth recovery. Just space. I told you I was handling that, he said finally. You said everything was under control, I replied. And it is, he said sharply. Why are you acting like it is? Because it is. But I didn't say that. Instead, I asked something simpler. When were you going to tell me? I was going to, he said. You just jumped to conclusions. Jumped. Another deflection. It's my name on the account, I said calmly. I know that, he snapped, and I said I'd handle it. His voice had changed completely now. No softness. No care. Just irritation. Then why didn't you? I asked. Because things take time, he raised his voice. Not everything happens instantly. I stayed quiet, letting him fill the space again. You wouldn't understand how things work here, he continued. It's different. Different. That word again. Always placing distance. Always creating separation. I'm not asking about here, I said. I'm asking about responsibility. He exhaled sharply. Look, he said, his tone hard now. Are you going to help or not? There it was. No more layers. No more soft language. Just the question. Direct. Demanding. I let the silence stretch for a moment before answering. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted him to sit in it. To feel it. To realize something had shifted. Before I spoke again. Let me ask you something. Would you still help someone like this? Someone who avoids the truth? Someone who shifts blame? Someone who only reaches out when they need something? Most people hesitate here, because the answer changes everything. And if you're still watching without subscribing, tell me why below. Because moments like this, they don't come with warnings. I'll think about it, I said finally. A pause. Then, fine, he replied, clearly frustrated. Just don't take too long. No gratitude. No understanding. Just expectation. We ended the call shortly after. No resolution. No repair. Just clarity. I placed the phone down slowly and sat there in silence. Not hurt. Not confused. Just certain. Because in that conversation, everything had been confirmed. Not just what he had done, but who he had become. That was when I stopped being his mother and became his consequence. By the time I finished that last call with Quentin, I wasn't guessing anymore. I wasn't hopping for clarity. I had it. Every word he said. Every detail I uncovered. Every decision they made. It all pointed in one direction. And once you reach that point, there's only one thing left to do. Act. But not loudly. Not emotionally. Precisely. The next morning, I made a call. Not to the bank. Not to Quentin. To someone who deals in facts, not feelings. A lawyer. His name was Daniel Harper. We had crossed paths years ago when my husband was still alive. Steady man, careful with his words. The kind of person who listens more than he speaks. Exactly what I needed. He agreed to meet that afternoon. His office was quiet. Organized. Everything in its place. I sat across from him and placed the folder on his desk. Documents. Notes. Printed records. All arranged in order. He didn't interrupt as I spoke. Didn't rush me. Didn't question the pace. He just listened. Carefully. Patiently. When I finished, he leaned back slightly and folded his hands. Beatrice, he said, this is not a misunderstanding. I know, I replied. This is financial misconduct, he continued, and possibly fraud. I nodded. That word had already settled in my mind. We start by protecting you, he said. How? I asked. We notify the bank immediately, he replied. Formally, not just a conversation. That mattered. Because informal conversations can be ignored. Documents can't. We also request a hold on any final settlement related to the property, he added. A hold, I repeated. Yes, he said. If funds are still in motion, we stop them. That was the first real shift. Not just reacting to what had been done, but interrupting what was still happening. Within hours, everything began moving. Daniel contacted the bank's legal department directly. Not customer service. Not general support. The people who handle risk. The tone changed immediately. Because now, it wasn't just a late payment. It was a case. Documentation was submitted. Evidence reviewed. Flags raised. The account that had been sitting quietly was no longer quiet. That's when the next layer opened. The fraud department got involved. Not because of the missed payments, because of the identity usage. My name. My financial standing. Used without authorization in a business application. That changed everything. Because banks don't take that lightly. They don't debate it. They act on it. Investigations were opened. Records pulled. Connections traced. And for the first time, they weren't in control of the situation anymore. By the end of the day, restrictions were placed. Accounts reviewed. Transactions flagged. Access limited. Not permanently, but enough. Enough to disrupt. Enough to create pressure. Because when money stops moving, everything stops moving. Plans. Comfort. Stability. All of it depends on access. And now, that access wasn't guaranteed. Daniel didn't stop there. He filed formal notice regarding the co-signed loan, documenting that I had not been informed of the sale, that I had not approved the financial decisions made afterward, that I had not consented to any use of my identity beyond the original agreement. Each statement mattered. Each one added weight. Because this wasn't just about proving they were wrong. It was about proving I was right. With evidence. The last step came quietly. No announcements. No warnings. Just action. A report was filed. Not emotional. Not exaggerated. Clear. Direct. Focused on facts. Because once identity misuse enters the picture, it becomes something else entirely. Something that doesn't stay between family members. Something that moves beyond personal boundaries and into legal ones. Let me tell you something. Most people don't act at this stage. They hesitate. They hope things will resolve themselves. They avoid making it official because it feels too serious, too final. But that hesitation, it costs them everything. She saw the danger early. Most people don't. Subscribe before you learn this the hard way. And if you think you'd handle it differently, explain why below. Because when it's your name on the line, every second matters. By the second day, everything had shifted. The silence from Quentin wasn't confidence anymore. It was uncertainty. Because systems had been triggered. Processes set in motion. And those things don't stop just because someone wants them to. They move forward. Step by step. Without emotion. Without hesitation. Exactly the way I had. I sat back in my chair that evening, the same way I had days before. Same kitchen. Same quiet. But everything felt different now. Not lighter. Stronger. Because control had returned. Not over them, but over my position. My name. My future. And that was enough. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. And for the first time in days, I allowed myself a small pause. Because now, the roles had changed. I answered. But I didn't speak first. On the other end, his voice came through. Tense. Unsteady. Mom, please. And just like that, everything had come full circle. Then my phone rang, and he was begging. Mom, please. That was how he started. Not with an explanation. Not with control. With a request. His voice was different now. No smooth tone. No careful phrasing. Just tension. What's going on? He asked quickly. I just got a call from the bank. They said there's some kind of restriction. Accounts are frozen. What did you do? I didn't answer immediately. I let him sit in the question. Because for once, he didn't have the answers. Quentin, I said calmly, you sound worried. Of course I'm worried, he snapped. Everything's locked. Payments aren't going through. There's some kind of investigation. What is this? What is this? As if it had appeared out of nowhere. As if it wasn't built from his own choices. I took steps to protect myself, I replied. Protect yourself from what? He asked sharply. This is just a misunderstanding. There it was. The word people reach for when they don't want to admit the truth. It stopped being a misunderstanding when my name was used without my consent, I said. Silence. Then, what are you talking about? He asked. Too quickly. Too defensive. The business account, I replied. The credit line, my information attached to it. Another pause. Longer this time. Mom, I can explain. I'm sure you can, I said, cutting him off gently. But I'm not interested in explanations anymore. His breathing changed on the other end. Faster now. Unsteady. Then I heard movement. A voice in the background. Sharp. What's happening? Jillian asked. She's saying something about the account, Quentin replied, his voice tight. Things are frozen. There was a brief shuffle, and then her voice came closer. B, she said, her tone no longer polite. What exactly did you report? Not what happened. Not what went wrong. What did you report? I almost smiled. Because that question told me everything. I reported the truth, I said. What truth? She snapped. You're blowing this out of proportion. Out of proportion. Another familiar phrase. I don't think I am, I replied. You don't understand how things work here, she said, her voice rising. You've complicated everything. Complicated. That's what she called it. Not wrong. Not illegal. Just inconvenient. Mom, listen, Quentin cut in quickly. We were going to fix everything. You didn't have to take it this far. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Take it this far. As if there was a line I had crossed. You sold the house, I said calmly. Silence. You cleared the account, I continued. No response. You stopped making payments, I added. Still nothing. And then you asked me for more money, I finished. The silence on the other end said more than anything they could have said. It wasn't like that, Quentin said finally. How was it? I asked. Another pause. We just needed time, he said. Things were moving fast and we had to make decisions. You had to make decisions. Yes, I replied. You did. And I was going to handle the loan, he added quickly. But you didn't, I said. I would have, he insisted. But you didn't, I repeated. That's the part people can't argue with. Not what they planned. Not what they meant. What they did. This is unbelievable, Jillian snapped. After everything we've done, this is how you respond. Everything we've done. I considered that for a moment. What exactly have you done? I asked. She didn't answer. Because there was no answer that fit. You've made a mistake, she said instead, and now you're making it worse. No. They had made a mistake. I was correcting it. I sat forward slightly, my voice steady. You traded your mother for a lifestyle. The words landed clean. No emotion. No hesitation. Just truth. On the other end. Silence. Complete. Because there was nothing to argue with. Nothing to soften. Nothing to explain away. That was the decision they made. And now they had to face it. Mom, Quentin said, his voice lower now, almost unrecognizable. We didn't think it would go this far. Of course you didn't. People rarely do. Undo it, he added quickly. Call them back, tell them it's fine, we'll fix everything. There it was again. Expectation. Even now. Even here. He still believed I would step in. That I would reverse it. That I would carry the weight, one more time. No, I said. Just that. No explanation. No added words. Just clarity. You're overreacting, Jillian said sharply. This doesn't have to escalate. It already had. You've done enough, I replied. What does that mean? Quentin asked. It means I'm finished, I said. The line went quiet again. No arguments. No raised voices. Just the absence of control. Because for the first time, they didn't have any. I'll handle things from here, I added calmly. You can't just, Quentin started. I can, I said. And that was the end of that. No more discussion. No more negotiation. No more roles to play. I ended the call and set the phone down gently. The house was quiet again. just like before. But this time, it felt different. Not empty. Complete. And just like that, it was over. After that call, there was no follow-up. No messages. No apologies. No attempts to explain things differently. Just silence. The kind that doesn't feel uncomfortable. The kind that feels final. I didn't reach out. Not because I couldn't, but because I chose not to. Some doors don't need to be closed loudly. They just need to stay shut. In the days that followed, I went through my routine like I always had. Morning tea. A short walk. Time spent in a house that had seen more years than most people would understand. But something had shifted. Not in my surroundings. In me. There was no lingering question. No second guessing. No wondering if I had done too much or too little. Because when you finally see things clearly, there's nothing left to debate. I took down the photo from the fridge. The one from Quentin's graduation. Not out of anger. Not out of spite. But out of clarity. Because that version of him no longer existed. And holding on to it wouldn't change anything. It would only delay acceptance. So I placed it in a drawer, closed it, and moved on. The situation with the bank resolved itself properly this time. With structure, with documentation, with accountability placed where it belonged. It didn't happen overnight, but it happened because once things are handled the right way, they move in the right direction. And as for Quentin and Jillian, their situation didn't stabilize the way they expected. Because shortcuts don't build anything solid. They only create temporary comfort. And temporary comfort doesn't last. Weeks passed. Then months. And somewhere in that time, I realized something important. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for a call. Not for an explanation. Not for things to go back to how they were. Because there was nothing to go back to. Only forward. And forward felt lighter than I expected. I made a decision. A simple one. But meaningful. I sold my house. Not out of pressure. Not out of necessity. But out of choice. I wanted something different. A place where the past didn't sit in every corner. A place that belonged entirely to me. So I moved. South. Warmer weather. Quieter surroundings. A smaller home. But one that felt right. People think peace comes from fixing everything. It doesn't. It comes from knowing what's worth carrying and what is. I didn't carry resentment. Didn't carry anger. Because those things weigh more than they give. What I carried instead was understanding, clarity, and the knowledge that I had done exactly what needed to be done. No more. No less. Here, what I learned through all of this. Family is important, but it is not an excuse. Not for dishonesty. Not for manipulation. Not for crossing lines that should never be crossed. Respect matters. And once it's gone, everything built on it goes with it. That's the part people struggle to accept. Because they want to believe family protects you from consequences. It doesn't. If anything, it makes those consequences more necessary. So let me ask you something. What would you have done differently? Would you have walked away sooner? Would you have given one more chance? Or would you have done exactly what I did and drawn the line where it needed to be drawn? And be honest. Was she right or too harsh? Because situations like this don't come with easy answers. Only real ones. I sit on my porch now, most evenings. A cup of tea in my hand. Watching the sun settle into the horizon. No noise. No pressure. Just quiet. And in that quiet, there's something stronger than forgiveness. Something more lasting than anger. Acceptance. Because life doesn't always give you the ending you expected. But it always gives you the chance to decide what comes next. People think grandmothers are soft, but they forget we survived everything.